Hi all, welcome to our webinar today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join myself and Danielle to talk about how to scope out your needs for a new HR system. So why don't we get started with our agenda for today? So today what we'll be covering off is how to establish a baseline for HR activity. So really understanding what you're spending your time on in your activity and what could be streamlined in your role. How to define and align your HR and wider business priorities, how to scope out the needs of the wider business, when, why, and how to encourage or engage decision makers in your process. And then we're going to have a live Q&A at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So first of all, why don't we run through some of the most common problems that we see when a business is trying to look at a HR platform for their organization and how we might be able to solve for some of these. So Danielle and I, as an introduction, I'm one of the sales managers here. And Danielle, do you want to give a brief introduction on yourself?
Hey everyone. Yes, of course, my name is Danielle and I'm an account executive with Employment Hero. So working with customers day to day to help get Employment Hero involved in the business.
Yeah, so we're speaking to customers all the time, and we see that sometimes when they take a look at HR systems, they're going to be looking at a few, and it's very, very common that they get overwhelmed by all the features that they see, and they kind of don't know what their priorities are, and there's just so much to look at. You can get distracted from what you actually need. So given a lot of platforms out there have a multitude of features, you can get distracted by, oh, I might actually want that, or I don't know what I want. Misalignment with business goals is also something that's quite common. Is actually understanding where the business wants to go and how a HR system can align to those goals, rather than just the goals of what HR needs. And I see it a lot, Danielle, I don't know about you, but choice overload. There's so many different platforms out there and you're never comparing apples with apples. So it's really about just uncovering your needs. And we're going to go through how you can do that as well, so that you don't get overwhelmed by features and by what products are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple other things that we commonly see, right, is, choosing a system, but we haven't, considered other stakeholders and, might not have included what their priorities are, right? So really engaging those stakeholders throughout the process is super important. But another thing we often see, is risk of being pigeonholed, right? We come in with an idea and this is all that we want, but then don't realize, the other impacts that it can have on the wider business, right? And then this last bullet point that we obviously will aim to solve through going through this with you guys today is, factor in those future needs, right? We might have kind of our immediate needs, but, what's going to pop up down the road that this is going to help out with. So what we'll cover in kind of the remaining slides is how we can avoid these problems. And yes, as Jewel said in the chat box, any questions, feel free to pop those in as we go.
All right, why don't we start off with how to establish a baseline of your HR and people management activity. And this is really important so that we can start to build a return on investment on a solution, but really to see where we can maximize the time savings for those in HR roles or who are doing these specific tasks. So what I see a lot is that our customers, before they start evaluating, they'll spend a few days or up to a week taking note of what they're actually spending their time on, because sometimes you're so caught up in the day-to-day, you don't actually realize what you're doing. So start to keep a log of time spent on tasks, kind of like a timesheet, and what are your non-negotiables, and what are those tasks that are taking up the time that you need a HR system to do. So for instance, if you're spending half your days doing employee onboarding because you're growing really quickly, you definitely need an onboarding platform. So here are a couple of examples of things you might want to uncover where you're spending some time. So for instance, employee self-service. So how often are your employees coming to you to update their details or to put in leave or to check a leave balance, or to do just small employee tasks that they could potentially do themselves? So this is, I think, something that also ties in with employee engagement. Employees are going to be more engaged if they can just log in and do it themselves. And the admin burden across the workforce is just eliminated. So that's one thing that I see takes up a lot of time. The other thing is actually getting data into systems. So integration would be super important. So think about when a new employee starts or when they update their details, put in leave, or need to submit timesheets into a system. Does all of that data synchronize into your payroll system and then flow into your accounting platform? Or are you handling a lot of data multiple times? And that's not just an efficiency benefit for you. It's about making sure that you're not double handling data and you don't have any room for error there. Service and support is also something really important to consider. So when you're looking at providers, take a look or ask the right questions. What support is included in my subscription? What do I get from the start? What services are involved in assisting me to get this system set up? And you want to make sure that you are actually setting up the system efficiently and correctly from the start, so that you don't have any issues later on, or you are getting the right training so you know how to use the system, and your employees also have the right tools to use the system. Ease of use actually ties into that service and support. So when you're looking at a platform, because it's not just you that's going to be using it, it's actually everyone in the wider organization, you need it to be super easy and accessible. So something that's got a clean user interface, something that employees are used to using, similar to when they use Facebook. You can see a lot of programs have a similar look and feel, and you'll notice that, that's what they're drawn to, that, oh, I've used a similar system before. I know that there's a sidebar on the side and I know where to click to do everything. And something that's accessible. So not every industry or not every employee is going to be in front of their computer all the time. So it's important that they can access a system through their phone as well, but making sure that it's secure and there are the right measures in place, like things like two-factor authentication, to make sure that all of your data is protected. So think about the employee life cycle, and also think about where you're spending time predominantly in the cycle. So different times of year, you might spend different times doing these certain sections. So for instance, the beginning of the year, you might be heavily focused on recruitment. Maybe around June, July, August, you're doing your performance reviews. So think about different times of year and when things are taking up your time. And normally this one right in the middle, the engagement piece, is the one that comes at the end, because you might be spending a lot of your time doing the bare minimum, like attracting, recruiting, onboarding, and managing performance. That engagement can sometimes take the back seat. So when we're thinking about saving time, if you've saved time doing all these other aspects, what would you want to do to engage your staff and start thinking about your future needs as well? So that's our first part of today's webinar, and I'm going to put out a poll to you. So Julia, if you could kindly put out a poll for everybody to respond to. Do you know which tasks are taking up most of your time? So we'd like to know whether yes, no, you know, or you somewhat know. So we'll give you a quick moment to complete the poll. All right, that's very interesting to see. So we've got most of our attendees, 55% of our attendees have said yes, they do know where they're spending most of their time. But coming in second, we've got 36% who somewhat know where they're spending their time. So for those of you who don't know, it might be good to start jotting down what time you're spending, so that you know what your main priorities are here. I'm going to hand over to Danielle to go over this next section.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so the next piece that we really wanted to review with you that's critical here is how to define and align your HR and wider business priorities. So really what this kind of amounts to here is understanding from an organizational perspective, how your HR priorities and your business leaders, want out of you as an HR professional. So some questions that are typically really helpful to ask as you start to consider a solution here is how you track and ensure compliance, right? How you measure engagement, performance, happiness, and collect data. As Sarah was kind of starting to mention, and kind of how we started to eliminate those common problems we run into is either getting pigeonholed or getting distracted by all the features, right? And so having that list of your must-haves and nice-to-haves is a really helpful process to do as you kind of go through how your features are actually going to align with what the business is really focused on. Now, the first piece that's really helpful that adopting a solution really helps with is your compliance, right? And what we've seen, unfortunately, time and again, is a lot of customers start to look at a solution, they don't even realize they're not compliant, right? And what this can mean is, looking at your contracts, right? Are your employment agreements up to date with current legislation, right? Have you reviewed them within the last 12 months? Have you actually reviewed them with your individual employees, right? So things like with the national employment standards, that the updates are rolled out. I even think there was one last month. It's oftentimes kind of hard to stay on top of manually, and especially with what Sarah was mentioning, all of your tasks and everything you're doing day to day. It's important to make sure that we know that our pay and leave entitlements meet that minimum, right? This also involves things like your policies, right? Are your policies actually acknowledged and not just read by your employees? Do you have an easy way to store those, right? And then in terms of your time and attendance and awards, right? In terms of your timesheets, how are you processing those? In terms of the awards, if any, you're falling under, are you confident that your pay, bonuses, commissions, and benefits are compliant, right? And within awards, I mean, we've worked with, I know a couple customers that come to mind, anywhere from 2 to 7 awards that they're keeping track of at a given time, right? And that means keeping track of their pay slips, keeping track of all of their timesheet processing, as well as any updates to those awards, right? And so within the compliance piece, really what we're aiming to do is making sure that the software, you don't have to actually question these things, right? Making sure you're actually automatically on top of this and making your guys' lives a little bit easier. Now, beyond the compliance piece, really what we want to understand is how your solution actually aligns with things like employee engagement and employee performance. And with the slide that Sarah even just mentioned, you can start to involve those wider business initiatives throughout the HR process, even before onboarding, right? We've obviously outlined this. You guys will get these slides afterwards as well. But a big piece is, obviously including this within the attraction and recruitment and onboarding stage and starting to engage your employees. So things like custom surveys, right? Things like coaching, one-on-one, ongoing development, right? Which is a wider business priority, but that's actually falling under HR. Do you have a solution that can actually align and centralize those things, right? A really interesting, statistic that we've come across many times is even just with employee performance, an onboarding program is a critical part of that, right? So there's a lot of studies that actually show that effective programs can contribute to up to 11% increase in employee performance. So as we start to, build a case for an HR solution, it's those types of data and information that you can start to feed up and start to communicate to the business as to how it's all actually tying together. Now, Jules, if you could actually start the poll here, would love to actually hear from the audience again. If you guys feel confident that your HR and wider business goals are currently aligned. Awesome. So yeah, we've got an interesting mix here as well. We've got about 42% of you guys are saying, somewhat aligned, but the majority is in that no column, right? So no and somewhat is kind of the majority of your answers. And so what becomes really interesting.
Just shared our results as well, Danny.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. It's
awesome.
Everyone's pretty even here, so it's interesting to see.
We go. It's really interesting when we kind of dive into this, and the goal is to start to think about this. Awesome.
All right. Well, why don't we get into now how to scope out the needs of the business? Because as HR professionals, you're going to know how to scope out your needs now. But how do we actually find out where the wider business wants to improve and where they might see value as well? And the reason why that's so important is because we want other people bought into this. So if we can get other stakeholders involved and actually seeing value from a system, this is really going to help you get this system across the line for yourself, but then obviously for everybody else. So one thing that you might want to consider is a requirements checklist, or sometimes even called a requirements matrix. I've seen hundreds of these in my time. So a HR manager will come in, they'll put together a list of things, and they'll actually score them on must have, nice to have, maybe need as top of the list. And they'll say to me, hey, Sarah, can you actually let me know what your system does in relation to my needs? And as a vendor, I'd go in and actually tick off what we can do, what we can't do, and what we can partially meet. And they actually get one or two vendors to do that so they can do a comparison. And because the vendor is an expert in their own system, you can actually just send it to them, and most representatives will be happy to do that for you. But this is an example of what something might look like. So actually segregating it out into sections. So you might have your needs around compliance, employee engagement. Here we've got business management and development. But go around the organization and also find out what some of the challenges are experienced in other departments and for other senior leaders, and see if you can add some of their requirements to your checklist as well, because it'll make them feel like they're involved in this process and they're also seeing some benefit. Then what you want to do is narrow it down. So once you've got your requirements, as I was saying, you want to go out and actually seek vendors and look at a couple of products. Now here it says select at least 3 HR software products to compare. I've seen instances where people have just brought 2 side by side and shortlisted it down, so it's easier to make that decision. But it's totally up to you. I think 3 is a good number to look at. Ask for a demonstration. That will give you the best idea on the look and feel and give you the ability to ask questions live. And a free trial can also help. I know Employment Hero offers a free trial that you can actually go in and click all the buttons, and some people learn and like to feel the look and feel of the system before they purchase. So that's also an option as well. And then drill down into specific features around those needs that you have. So start with those that are the most important to you in your business. Select those 3 and ask the presenter to focus on those first. Once you've ticked those boxes, maybe look at some other features that might be aligned with your nice to haves or your future needs in the business. So here's something that you might want to screenshot, or we will send you this afterwards along with a bit of information. This is what Employment Hero does as part of our offering. So it does actually tick a lot of the boxes around the life cycle of employees, but this is a nice screenshot to say, okay, can Employment Hero meet the needs in these areas? And you can actually cross-check this against your matrix. So I want to put another poll out here. So Jules, if you could assist with this one, do you already know what features you need or want out of a new system? Or maybe you're still not sure yet. Okay, so I can see we've got an even split between yes and no, but most people are somewhat, so kind of 50-50 there. So it might help you to actually have conversations across the wider business to see what other people might want in their business. And I'll give you a little tip here. Ask your CFO, if you've got a CFO or a financial controller or someone who deals with the financing of the system, ask them what their priorities are, because you definitely want to get them on board. I don't know, Danny, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to chat through next. Actually leads us really well into this kind of last point for you, is when and why and how you should engage your key stakeholders. All right. As your decision makers can make or break this, right? So if you're all gung-ho on adopting a solution, we've seen it time and again, and we definitely have some tips and tricks to help you guys get a solution across the line. In our experience, and kind of the 4 key ways you can actually get your preferred solution across the line is starting with this first piece, right? Who actually needs to be involved in the conversation? And oftentimes what I've seen with many customers is they involve every single person of their leadership team, when in reality it might just be one person, right? And so the easiest way is to figure that out and simplify, right? And bring them on as early as you can in the process, right? So get them across what you're considering. And more importantly, as Sarah was just mentioning, get an understanding for what their priorities are. Because oftentimes, those types of conversations can actually change the process, because you may not be aware of something that they're really focused on and how this might feed into that, right? For example, the employee engagement, or redefining company values and coming up with a rewards and recognition program. And then more importantly, that's how a solution can feed into that, right? So a couple examples there. And then more importantly, once you've really championed a product and you're really excited about bringing something on board, this third point is super important. Be prepared to stand your ground and have the whys as to why you're pushing for a particular product, right? So they might have some pushback, they might be a little bit hesitant, especially if you're going from quite a manual, maybe paper-based process, and you're bringing on technology for the first time, right? And so having all the data and the whys, the statistics, and having all of your information well prepared is going to really help here. Something that Sarah and I do for a lot of our customers is, provide business cases, right? Help them build an ROI. How much time are we going to be saving? Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I've seen this so many times where someone's so certain on bringing in a tool, and then they get blocked for some reason by somebody else in the organization, and they can get frustrated. Whereas I kind of offer the advice, well, why don't we find out the underlying reason why this person doesn't want this solution? And then we can talk around it. Maybe they've seen someone try to implement a HR platform in the organization before and fail, and they don't want that again. Maybe they're scared that this is going to take up too many of their duties, and they're not going to have a job. So it's really important to understand the why and then to address the why. So if they're not feeling comfortable with the solution, maybe bring them in on a demonstration and have them lead it, or them ask questions and have them feel really certain before you bring it on board, because you definitely want to get everybody on board and understand why they might be hesitant to bring in a solution.
Yeah, Sarah, that's such a good point. And something that I've repeatedly seen is fear of getting how much resourcing it'll take to even set up a product. And so fully scoping out the timelines for that and actually getting a really good overview of how much resourcing it would require. For example, Employment Hero is a product that we aim to get up with the HR solution within 4 weeks, right? Doing things a couple hours a week. And oftentimes folks will think it's something they'll need to do every single day, all day long. And so, kind of to Sarah's point, just getting that why and really addressing those so that all questions are answered really helps. Now, this last bullet point, I'm sure you guys are all, across this, but everyone's busy, right? And you want to make sure that you're clear and concise when you go in to present this, and you're not wasting their time. So some tips and tricks with this is actually presenting data, right? Presenting facts, actually have a very concise business case as to why you've made your decision, and, the actual benefit it'll bring the business as a whole. So, if you guys have any other questions on this piece, definitely pop them in the box though.
All right, so just want to run through our final takeaways today. As I mentioned a couple of times throughout, we will be sending you some examples of what you might want to start building here. So our team will put anything in an email. They'll send it out to you. We'll also have a recording. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to maybe run through some, just a summary of important tips and next steps. So getting the tick of approval is the hardest part, I think, of getting a system in place, especially if someone doesn't see the value like you do. So make sure that you're reminding the team of what your key requirements are. Make sure that you can present your shortlisted solutions and why you're going with one solution over the other. Confirm your final budget and timeline. And I think that's important for all parties involved, to make sure you're very clear on when you want to implement a solution, and whether it fits within your budget or not. And lead the team to a conclusion. So if you've got multiple stakeholders in this decision, make sure you're closing it and you've got the right decision made at a time, because if it drags on for a long time, then I've seen it a lot of times, I don't know about you, Danny, where a decision just doesn't get made and people kind of think, oh, well, we couldn't make a decision, it was too hard. So if you can kind of lead that and say, well, these are our requirements, it sounds like we align to this one, I think it's easier to get everyone aligned on that. And if all else fails, build a business case. We'll send you an example of this as well. So hopefully you won't need to build it from the ground up. A lot of our team do send examples of business cases to businesses to help them get Employment Hero in. So we'd love to help with that. And as I said, do a trial during your process, request a free trial. I mean, not every software vendor provides a free trial, but most do. So I think it's a really good opportunity to see, is this intuitive? Can I use this every day? Is it easy? So if you log in for the first time and you know what to do, well, how easy is that going to be to implement into your workplace? So as I said, we'll send you a list of resources after today's session to help. But I'd love to go through some Q&A. I think we've got a couple of questions here. I'm not sure, Danny, if you want to take a look at some of those questions and we can get them answered.
Yeah, so there's a question here. Do you offer a service that can help me to make sure I'm compliant beyond your service? Yeah, if let's see here. So we do offer, yep, sorry, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of background on Employment Hero. So we're founded by a really cool guy called Ben Thompson. He used to be an employment lawyer by trade, and that's actually the reason why he built Employment Hero. He saw too many businesses being non-compliant, not because it was their fault, just because Australian legislation or international legislation is actually very hard to follow when it comes to HR. So Employment Hero does offer additional services. So we've got some advisory services on top, so HR advice and payroll advice. But then we've also got an in-house legal team. So at a separate hourly charge, they're happy to consult if you need that additional level of service. Danielle, do you want to just run through the questions for us and we can?
Yes. Great. There's another question here. Can you talk more about the type of integrations? I can answer that one. Essentially, we integrate with a couple different payroll solutions. So we integrate with Xero for payroll, as well as MyAB Account Right Live, as well as KeyPay. And so typically those are the most common payroll integrations. If you have any other follow-up questions to that, feel free to pop that in the channel as well.
Yeah, some businesses also like to, if they've got another system where they just want to send off user details, like an employee email and name. We've got an open API where if you've got a developer, you can really easily just links data out of Employment Hero to another platform. It's not really recommended for a payroll integration, but it's good if you need employee data to actually set up users on other platforms as well.
Next question here. I'm looking at changing to Xero for payroll. Do you think I should get this set up before I implement Employment Hero, or can I start using Employment Hero first and then add in Xero later down the line? Sarah, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally up to you what you'd like to do. So I can talk through both scenarios. If you set up Employment Hero first, and then you get Xero, you just sync the two and all of your employee files will move from Employment Hero across into Xero. And it works the other way around as well. So if you get Xero first and then you get Employment Hero, once you plug the two together, it'll sync back the other way. So either way, you can get the data syncing, whichever one's, I guess, the most of a priority for you as a business. So if your priority is to start to onboard employees and get HR compliant, then you'd start with Employment Hero. If your priority is to do your accounting package and you switch over there, you'd start with Xero. Was there anything else left over there, Danny?
Yep, there's one more question here. Can you talk through what the onboarding process would look like for a new employee? I haven't used a digital solution before and don't understand how it can be digital compared to physical forms. Can I use mobile? If you could walk through an example of accepting an offer to their first day, that would be great. Sarah, you want to take this?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is all digital because there are e-signatures built throughout the platform. So typically what you do as a HR manager or a business owner or anyone managing the system is you get a contract. There's contract templates in the system, or you can build your own template into the system as well. And you'd issue that out to the employee via email. So you're going to put their personal email address in to start with and issue that to them. So the employee is going to get an email with a link. Once they click on the link, it'll pop up Employment Hero where they can log in for the first time. So they create their user details. They're going to come up with their contract. So they're going to sign that online. So if they're on a computer, they can use their mouse to do the signature, or if they're on their smartphone, they can use a finger on a touch screen. And then that actually takes them through step by step of their onboarding. So they initially need to fill out some forms like their personal, bank, super and tax forms. Now that's if they're in Australia, they'll have the super and tax. Other countries, it'll just be their personal details. And then they'll come to forms like a medical disclosure statement if you want that included. If you want the employee to provide uploads of copies of things like licenses, qualifications, they can either take photos from their phone or upload from their computer. And that creates their profile. And then the last step there is once you have all of your policies and your induction loaded into the platform, the employees will go through each one and check a box that says that, yes, I agree that I've read this policy or I've seen this piece of induction content and I'm ready to go. So that's a quick highlight. Danny, did I miss anything from that?
I was going to say, you did a really good job. We can also send you a link to our demo videos of the onboarding, which should help create a visual. Now we just have one more question here. Can I do the Xero integration myself? And yes. So our implementation journey is designed to be a series of live workshops that you attend that our implementations team hosts. And the very first workshop is integrating your payroll solution. So it walks you through how to set up your Xero integration, and it's a really quick and seamless process.
It's so easy. It's like a plug and play, right? So you just click a button, it connects with Xero, and then you log into Xero and then it connects the two. So it takes all of a couple of minutes, and then there might be a few errors that you need to correct if there's a mismatch in data, but it's so easy. Yeah. All right, does that cover all our questions? I think the last thing that I wanted to run through is if you do have any additional questions, or if you ever want to contact myself and Danny, we are more than happy to help. So I've popped our email addresses up on the screen. You'll also get an email from our wider team. So if you want to respond to that, you can as well. Or if you feel like talking to somebody, you can call our main line and click, I think it's 1 for sales, and you can have a chat to the team about our HR solution. As I said, if you'd like to chat to myself or Danny directly, our email addresses are up on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.